Space has been quiet for so long that we almost forgot how fragile our sense of normal truly is. But this month, NASA's deep sky instruments captured something that defies the pattern. An interstellar object, designated 3I Atlas, has entered our solar system, and the first measurements are unlike anything humanity has ever seen. It is not just larger than Oumuamua or Borisov. According to the latest data, its structure could be over 1 million times greater in volume than any previous interstellar comet ever recorded. 1 million. That number alone should be impossible. Yet the light curves do not lie. This thing is massive, complex, and alive with motion. And it is not behaving like a comet at all. When Oumuamua passed through in 2017, it tumbled like a shard of mirror, fading as it escaped the sun's light. 2 years later, Borisov appeared, a true comet, venting ice as it raced through the inner system. But 3I Atlas is different. Its brightness increases with distance. Its jets pulse in rhythm. And telescopes from Hawaii to Chile keep capturing faint geometric shadows in the halo around it, as though something inside is reconfiguring, not disintegrating. The official reports call it a fragment of ice and dust from another star system. But fragments do not form patterns, debris does not hold symmetry, and comets do not resist the sun. For weeks, NASA's Deep Space Network has been tracking its trajectory, an elongated hyperbolic arc plunging toward the inner solar system at over 200,000 kilometers per hour. As it approaches, it grows brighter, not from melting, but from reflection, as if light itself is being directed, shaped, or focused by something hidden beneath its crust. Every new image makes the mystery deeper. The numbers hold, the physics does not. Astronomers are calling it a scientific event. Others, quietly, are calling it a warning. Because if the measurements are correct, if 3I Atlas truly is 1 million times larger than any previous comet, then we are witnessing not an object, but an arrival. And before we can understand what it is, we must ask the question no one wants to say out loud. What if it is not breaking apart, but building something? The story of 3I Atlas did not begin with headlines. It began with a whisper of light, an anomaly detected by the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System in early 2025. At first, astronomers thought it was just another faint speck among the thousands of comets catalogued every year. But the data felt wrong. Its path through the sky did not match any known solar orbit. Its trajectory was hyperbolic, meaning it was not bound to the sun at all. It was coming from deep interstellar space, just like 1I Oumuamua in 2017 and 2I Borisov in 2019. But this one was different from the very first observation. Its brightness was too strong. Its coma, the glowing cloud of gas and dust surrounding it, was already massive, far too large for an object still billions of kilometers away. Something enormous was moving toward us. When the Minor Planet Center officially designated it as 3I Atlas, it became only the third confirmed interstellar object in history. Astronomers across the globe turned their instruments toward it. The Subaru telescope in Hawaii, the Very Large Telescope in Chile, and even amateur observatories began capturing its faint turquoise halo as it moved through the constellations of Pegasus and Aquarius. Spectral readings showed a strange combination of gases, carbon dioxide, ammonia, trace metals, but almost no water. That was the first red flag. Comets are frozen relics of planetary formation. They should be rich in water ice. But 3I Atlas was dry, dusty, and metallic, glowing in wavelengths that suggested reflected rather than emitted light. As the weeks passed, new data poured in. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory refined its trajectory, confirming that it had never before visited the inner solar system. Its velocity relative to the Sun was too high for capture, about 60 kilometers per second, faster than any object of its kind. It was, in every measurable sense, an interstellar visitor, but its behavior made no sense. Instead of breaking apart as it approached the Sun's heat, 3I Atlas appeared to stabilize. Its rotational speed slowed. Its brightness curve flattened, suggesting not decay, but equilibrium. Some observers even reported intermittent pulses, brief flashes repeating at intervals of several hours. The data were real, recorded by multiple instruments, yet no one could explain them. NASA and ESA released joint statements urging caution, describing the findings as under review. Behind the scenes, however, scientific teams began to admit something extraordinary. The object's albedo, the measure of how much light it reflects, was far too high for natural material. Its surface seemed to behave like polished metal, scattering sunlight with mirror-like precision. If it were truly a natural body, its size would have to be enormous to explain the brightness, possibly hundreds of kilometers across. That made it more than 1 million times larger in volume than Oumuamua. It was as if an entire fragment of a planet, or something built from planetary material, had entered our neighborhood. The public barely noticed at first. The world was distracted by other events. But inside the astronomy community, unease spread. There was precedent for this kind of confusion. Oumuamua had once defied explanation too. It had no visible tail, no outgassing, and yet it accelerated as if pushed by something unseen. Avi Loeb at Harvard had suggested that it might be an artificial light sail. His idea had been controversial, even mocked. But now, with 3I Atlas, some of those same scientists began to wonder if he had been right, because this time the numbers were even harder to ignore. By mid-year, the comet's course carried it steadily inward, heading toward its perihelion, the point of closest approach to the Sun. NASA's Parker Solar Probe, the Solar Orbiter, and multiple ground-based telescopes were assigned to monitor it. Each week, the object grew brighter and stranger. Its coma thickened into layers. Jets of gas erupted not randomly, but in structured sequences, almost geometric. It was behaving less like a comet disintegrating, and more like something reorganizing itself. Whatever 3I Atlas was, it had crossed the boundary between the known and the possible. And humanity was now standing on the edge, watching an interstellar mystery unfold in real time. By the time 3I Atlas entered the inner solar system, every major observatory on Earth was watching. The object's magnitude had increased beyond prediction, more than 10-fold brighter than any model could explain. In a normal comet, sunlight heats the surface, vaporizing ice and releasing gas in chaotic bursts. The coma expands, the nucleus breaks apart, and the brightness fades as the fragments scatter. But 3I Atlas defied that pattern completely. Its light curve stabilized, oscillating in a near-perfect rhythm, as though governed by an internal clock. Even its tail, if it could still be called that, behaved unnaturally. It stretched in multiple directions, some facing the Sun, some perpendicular to it, and some, inexplicably, pointing against the solar wind itself. When the Hubble Space Telescope captured its first high-resolution images, scientists expected to see a jagged, irregular rock like Borisov or Oumuamua. What they found instead stunned them. The coma was not a diffuse cloud, but a layered structure. concentric shells of reflective material surrounding a dark core that emitted almost no visible light. In infrared, the object appeared warm, as if radiating from internal heat sources rather than sunlight alone. The James Webb Space Telescope confirmed the readings, temperature fluctuations pulsing across its surface every few hours. Whatever it was not passive. It was active, as if energy were being generated, regulated, or redirected from within. NASA's analysts compared the data against every known cometary model, every dust and gas ratio, every light-scattering simulation. None of them fit. The energy output was too constant, the symmetry too precise. The coma's edges formed angular ridges, faint but real, geometry where none should exist. For the first time, some members of the Cassini imaging team, veterans of the Saturn mission, remarked that it looked less like a natural cloud and more like a containment field, a shell. Yet, officially, NASA remained silent. The agency released only partial images, cropped and desaturated, describing the object as anomalous but natural. It did not stop speculation. As data mounted, amateur astronomers began stitching together frames from different observatories. What emerged was extraordinary. The comet's trajectory had deviated slightly, by a measurable degree, but in a way inconsistent with solar radiation pressure or gravitational perturbation. It appeared to maneuver, not drastically, not like a ship changing course, but subtly, as though stabilizing itself against the pull of the sun. The idea seemed absurd until instruments at the Atacama Large Millimeter Array detected something else, a narrow beam of ionized material extending from the comet's surface toward the sun. Not venting gas, but directing it, like a jet of plasma. The more scientists looked, the more 3I Atlas refused to behave like a comet. Its rotation period changed irregularly, as if adjusting. Spectral analysis revealed compounds no comet should have: complex silicates, traces of nickel, even hints of titanium, and carbon nanotube-like structures in the reflected light. It was as if the object had metallic scaffolding woven through its body. If that were true, its density would be far greater than any icy nucleus, closer to an asteroid, or even a fragment of a planetary crust. And yet, it produced jets, emissions, light, all the hallmarks of an active body. By early autumn, scientists were forced to admit the impossible. 3I Atlas's estimated diameter exceeded 300 kilometers, roughly 1 million times the volume of Oumuamua. Its brightness should have blinded detectors, yet it fluctuated, dimming and flaring as if controlled. No known physical model could account for all its properties simultaneously. Some suggested it might be a piece of an interstellar rogue planet, sheared off during a collision eons ago. Others whispered about Dyson fragments, ruins of artificial structures drifting through the void. The most conservative voices called it coincidence. But every new image deepened the paradox. And still, 3I Atlas kept coming. As it approached the sun, it did not fragment. Instead, it became sharper, more defined. The layers of its coma compressed into luminous bands, and faint filaments extended outward like tendrils of magnetized dust. It looked almost alive. The solar orbiter, now within range, recorded ultraviolet patterns flowing across the object's surface like currents. The data reached NASA late one night, a stream of numbers that refused to make sense. Whatever 3I Atlas was, it had entered the inner solar system not to vanish, but to reveal something. Something vast, deliberate, and uncomfortably close. As 3I Atlas drew closer to the sun, the expectations of every astronomer were simple. It would fragment, flare briefly, and dissolve into dust, just as every comet before it had done. But that is not what happened. Instead of unraveling, it began to stabilize. Its coma condensed into a luminous cocoon, brighter and more compact than before, while its core, invisible for months, started to emerge in sharp relief. The solar orbiter caught the first clear images, a massive, asymmetric body, faintly polygonal, rotating far too slowly for an object its size. From Earth's telescopes, it shimmered in shifting shades of blue and gold, colors that no natural comet had ever displayed. Scientists called it phase interference, sunlight refracted through complex dust. But privately, even they could not agree on what they were seeing. The object was behaving less like ice sublimating into space, and more like structure under pressure. For a brief window, the Parker Solar Probe crossed the region near its projected path. Its instruments recorded something extraordinary, bursts of plasma jets not erupting randomly, but pulsing in patterned sequences, 3, then 5, then 7. Each burst corresponded to a measurable change in rotation. It was as if the object were correcting its orientation using its own emissions. The probe detected no radio signals, no artificial transmission, nothing that could definitively be called intelligent control. And yet, the behavior remained, the unmistakable signs of self-regulation. NASA downplayed the findings in public briefings, referring to them as outgassing anomalies. But the language in the internal reports was different. Coordinated venting patterns and mechanical regularity. At the same time, the Hubble and Webb telescopes recorded something even stranger. The tail of 3I Atlas, once diffuse and fan-shaped, began to divide into multiple filaments, each one curving in perfect symmetry around the nucleus. For a moment, it looked as if the comet were growing wings. But in motion, those filaments behaved like magnetic lines, bending and reconnecting as though sculpted by electromagnetic fields. Spectral data confirmed that the jets contained charged particles, plasma, not dust. The comet was not shedding material, it was manipulating it. The global astronomy community began to fracture under the weight of interpretation. Some claimed it was merely physics, a byproduct of rotation, heat, and solar magnetism interacting in new ways. Others saw intent. An internal leak from the European Southern Observatory revealed that analysts had detected microbursts of coherent light near the object, flashes at frequencies not typical of natural reflection. They lasted less than a second, repeating every few hours. Laser speculation spread, then was swiftly denied. But the timing of those denials only deepened suspicion. By October, 3I Atlas had reached perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun. This was supposed to be the moment of disintegration, when the heat would tear it apart. Instead, the opposite occurred. As Parker and Solar Orbiter aligned behind the Sun, they captured a halo forming around the object, a vast circular glow of ionized material spanning tens of thousands of kilometers, perfectly uniform, perfectly symmetrical. Its surface brightened with pulses of light in a slow heartbeat rhythm. Then, for just 6 minutes, its brightness dipped, its outline blurred, and the entire object vanished from optical view. Every telescope lost it simultaneously. For those few minutes, the third interstellar object in history became invisible. When it reappeared, its orientation had changed, its axis tilted 30 degrees from its original path, as though something inside had turned. NASA scientists called it a rotation anomaly, a coincidence of perspective. But the telemetry told a different story. The object's course had altered slightly, an impossible maneuver for a body with no propulsion. The shift was small, only fractions of a degree, but measurable and deliberate. Whatever happened at perihelion was not random. The world did not yet know any of this. The official narrative remained cautious. A comet behaving strangely, an outlier among outliers. But in the closed circles of astrophysics and defense, the conversation had changed. Some began to refer to 3I Atlas not as it, but as they. Because according to the latest light curve reconstructions, the object's brightness was now dividing, splitting into multiple peaks, as if the structure inside had separated into more than one part. And for the first time, a quiet, impossible thought began to take shape. What if this object was never falling apart, but assembling? In the aftermath of its perihelion, 3I Atlas did something that no comet in recorded history had ever done. It grew sharper, more defined, as if the violence of the sun had not destroyed it, but forged it. The brilliant coma that had once obscured its body began to fade, revealing a structure that defied categorization. It was immense, hundreds of kilometers across, faintly angular, covered in alternating bands of reflective and matte material. Every attempt to model its shape produced contradictions. Some images showed a flattened disk, others a lattice of intersecting planes, still others a series of hollow arcs rotating in synchronization. What the telescopes were seeing depended on wavelength, almost as if the object selectively absorbed certain frequencies of light. NASA's Solar Orbiter and the Parker probe transmitted their last sets of high-fidelity data before moving out of alignment. Those datasets showed an unexpected phenomenon, a persistent electromagnetic field surrounding the object, steady and oscillating with the same rhythm as the plasma jets detected weeks earlier. Its strength was not enough to indicate machinery, but far beyond what any cometary process could produce. The readings showed harmonics, like notes in a chord, resonating across multiple frequencies. It was as if 3I Atlas were humming. Theories began to multiply. Some scientists argued that this was a new class of interstellar fragment, perhaps the remnant of a dead planet's metallic core, surviving after a supernova. Others turned to the extraordinary. If Oumuamua had been a potential light sail, then perhaps this was its evolution, a construct, not a coincidence. Harvard's Avi Loeb, now accustomed to skepticism, spoke publicly again, suggesting that 3I Atlas might be an interstellar probe, a relic of an ancient civilization built to survive stellar crossings for eons. His proposal was dismissed by most institutions, but circulated widely online, fueled by leaked spectra from the European Space Agency, showing traces of structured carbon composites, arrangements too regular to be random crystal formation. By late November, even NASA's tone began to shift. Internal memos referenced non-stochastic emissions and persistent coherence. Transmissions from 3I Atlas displayed repeating modulation in reflected solar radiation, subtle, periodic variations not consistent with rotation or albedo effects. For some, it was a sign of communication. For others, it was coincidence, a trick of the instruments, a misinterpretation of noise. The truth was simpler and more unsettling. They did not know. The object refused to fit inside the boundaries of any known natural process. Then came the images, the ones the public was never meant to see. Released quietly through data archives, they appeared briefly on forums before being taken down. The frames showed faint geometric symmetry beneath the object's surface. Hexagonal lattice lines, parallel streaks, like scaffolding glowing beneath layers of translucent material. One image in particular, captured by Hubble's ultraviolet sensors, revealed something chilling. 6 luminous nodes aligned in a perfect ring, connected by filaments of faint light. Scientists called it pareidolia, an illusion born of pixel noise. But among the research teams, another term emerged: architecture. Around this time, ground-based arrays reported a second anomaly, an expanding field of ionized particles extending thousands of kilometers behind the object, forming a spiral wake aligned opposite its direction of travel. That pattern matched no known interaction with the solar wind. Instead, it resembled exhaust, controlled, consistent, and accelerating. And yet, there was no visible propulsion, no engine, no flare. Just motion, smooth, deliberate, and silent. Even as officials scrambled to downplay the data, the numbers spoke louder. The trajectory of 3I Atlas had changed again, minutely, precisely, as though nudged by an invisible hand. Its new course would take it past the orbit of Venus, then outward, along an exit path tilted 5 degrees from the ecliptic plane. But it was no longer a single object. Light curves from multiple observatories now showed several distinct peaks, moving in formation, holding exact relative positions. Not fragments drifting apart, but components moving together. A constellation. It was at that moment, in late December 2025, that the story stopped being about a comet at all. Something had entered our solar system, changed shape near the sun, and begun to leave, calmly, deliberately, and without a word. The official line remained unchanged: a disintegrating interstellar object. But within NASA's archives, one memo described it more simply: unidentified artificial phenomenon, active departure phase. When the first formation data reached Earth, the world was not prepared. The pattern emerging from the readings was too precise, too deliberate. The supposed fragments of 3I Atlas were not random debris, but arranged in geometric harmony, a hexagonal lattice drifting outward, maintaining fixed distances from one another with mathematical precision. Each body reflected sunlight differently, like panels of a colossal mechanism unfolding in slow motion. And all of them, impossibly, maintained identical velocity vectors relative to the sun, as if locked in a shared guidance system. NASA's Solar System Dynamics Laboratory spent weeks trying to model it as a gravitational coincidence, a fluke of trajectory and dust distribution, but the simulation always failed. The only way to reproduce the pattern was to assume mutual coordination. That meant interaction. That meant control. The Hubble telescope continued to capture faint but consistent reflections, 6 main bodies orbiting a central dark mass. From certain angles, it looked like a ring. From others, like a flower of light slowly blooming in the dark. The James Webb Space Telescope, operating in the infrared, confirmed localized heat signatures across each component, thermal energy out of sync with sunlight exposure, suggesting internal activity. The readings were weak, but unmistakable. Something within those structures was alive with motion. NASA's public briefings grew shorter, more cautious. Mentions of fragment coordination were replaced with photometric anomalies. Mentions of active structures were omitted altogether. But outside the official channels, the raw data told its own story. Amateur astronomers, analyzing the open-source light curves, discovered repeating intervals of brightness modulation, an oscillating pattern repeating every 26 minutes across multiple observation points around the globe. It was not a signal in any known sense. It carried no information. But it was too synchronized to be random. The sky itself seemed to be pulsing. And then, without warning, something extraordinary happened. On January 4th, 2026, as the object cluster moved beyond Venus's orbit, NASA's Stereo Observatory detected a sudden surge of electromagnetic radiation, a brief, broadband pulse spanning radio to gamma frequencies. It lasted less than half a second. Every deep space antenna from Canberra to Madrid registered the same spike. The source was traced not to a solar flare, nor to cosmic background interference, but directly to the coordinates of 3I Atlas. The pulse was broad, powerful, and coherent, like a single cosmic breath released across the void. Then, silence. The objects continued moving outward, undisturbed. Within hours, secure communications buzzed across agencies. The event was labeled solar interference. Publicly, NASA and ESA denied any anomaly, but within internal correspondence, the language changed again. The term object was retired. The new designation read Interstellar Structure, Autonomous Phase. It was an admission, quiet but undeniable, that whatever humanity was witnessing had passed beyond the limits of known physics. Over the following weeks, the formation began to accelerate, not by thrust or visible jets, but gradually, as if drawn along invisible rails. Each component adjusted its position in microscopic increments, maintaining a perfect hexagonal symmetry, while the group tilted toward the outer solar system. The change was too precise to be natural, too purposeful to be dismissed as coincidence. Telescopes recorded the reflected sunlight shifting into a deeper blue hue, the spectral signature of ionized gas interacting with electromagnetic fields. The structure was generating its own environment, wrapping itself in a sheath of plasma as it moved outward. Among scientists, a quiet dread took hold. If this was natural, it was beyond comprehension. And if it was not, if this was, in any sense, artificial, then humanity had just witnessed the first active maneuver by something not of this world. The implications rippled across every corner of the scientific community. Avi Loeb, once dismissed for his boldness, wrote a single line that spread like wildfire through encrypted channels. "We are no longer looking at debris. We are looking at intent." By mid-January, the formation had reached the orbit of Earth, silent, immense, and almost invisible. For one night only, under rare atmospheric clarity, a dozen observatories recorded faint diffraction patterns as moonlight scattered off its distant edges. And then, as if obeying some cosmic choreography, the formation began to dim, its components fading one by one, their heat signatures dropping toward zero. Within days, it was gone, still detectable by trajectory, but optically invisible. Whatever 3I Atlas had been, it had completed its transformation. It entered the solar system as a mystery, survived the sun, divided itself, and departed in silence. No message, no warning, no violence, just motion, precision, and disappearance. Humanity had stared into the dark and seen something vast stare quietly back. And for the first time in history, our species realized the truth that no one dared to speak aloud. We were not watching a comet at all. We were watching a decision. By the time February arrived, 3I Atlas and its formation had crossed the orbit of Mars, fading beyond the reach of all optical instruments. Only faint gravitational echoes and minute radio fluctuations hinted at its continued presence. The official record declared the event over, the data inconclusive. But in the small, dimly lit control rooms of deep space monitoring stations, no one believed it was gone. The object's trajectory, though faintly traceable, showed one last deviation, a slight curvature away from the ecliptic, bending upward toward interstellar space. It was as if the formation had finished what it came to do and was now leaving, returning to the ocean between the stars. The strange pulse detected in January continued to haunt analysts. Buried in the electromagnetic noise, signal specialists from JPL and the European Space Operations Center noticed something too consistent to be random: subharmonic intervals repeating every 143 minutes. It was not language, it was not code, but it was rhythm, steady, mathematical, and recurring over distances where no natural synchronization could persist. Some called it a heartbeat, others interference. A few, quietly, called it communication. The debate never reached the public. It was buried beneath layers of classification, archived in secure data vaults marked with the words, "Non-terrestrial source, pending review." As the weeks passed, the psychological weight of the event began to settle in. The scientists who had spent their careers looking outward now struggled to look at the sky at all. For decades, humanity had searched for a sign that it was not alone, but no one had expected the first contact to come without words, without sound, without meaning, just geometry and silence. In classrooms, documentaries, and simulations, alien intelligence had always been loud: signals, greetings, warnings. But 3i Atlas had shown something else, an intelligence, if it was intelligence at all, that acted without announcement, observation without acknowledgement, design without dialogue. It came, it changed, it left. The human mind was not prepared for that kind of indifference. Meanwhile, the few remaining instruments that could still detect its gravitational influence continued to register fluctuations, subtle, rhythmic perturbations that seemed to ripple outward from its path. Theorists began to speculate that the object had altered the very plasma field of interplanetary space, leaving behind a wake of magnetized turbulence stretching millions of kilometers long. One paper, quickly retracted, suggested that these fluctuations were not random, but encoded, that the shape of the wake itself contained information, like a signature written across the solar wind. And then, almost as if in response, a new anomaly appeared. On March 8th, instruments aboard the solar orbiter detected a perfectly symmetrical auroral burst at Saturn's North Pole, 6 spirals of light twisting upward from the planet's atmosphere, identical in geometry to the hexagonal formation of 3i Atlas's components. The event lasted 4 hours. No solar storm preceded it, and no magnetic alignment explained it. Saturn's auroras are ancient, chaotic, irregular. This one was none of those things. It was precise, mathematical, impossible. The patterns matched, point for point. Something had imprinted its symmetry onto the largest magnetic field in the outer solar system, and then it vanished, leaving only faint traces in ultraviolet light. For a brief moment, a few voices inside NASA asked the forbidden question: had 3i Atlas left something behind? But the thought was too large, too dangerous. Funding cycles, reputations, entire scientific disciplines depended on stability. So, the event was archived, labeled as unexplained but natural. Yet, outside of institutions, humanity had changed. The night sky no longer looked the same. People began to watch with quiet reverence, sensing that something vast had brushed against their world and moved on. A comet, they called it, because the truth had no language yet. But those who had seen the data, who had studied the geometry, knew better. They whispered that it was not a visitor, not a probe, not even a warning. It was a test, a quiet scan of intelligence, a glance across the threshold of existence. And in that silence, the universe had finally answered the question humanity had been asking since the beginning. Is anyone out there? The answer, it seemed, was yes. But they had already moved on. Months passed, and the mystery of Three-Eye Atlas began to fade from the headlines, drowned beneath politics and noise, as all miracles eventually are. But in the archives of NASA, ESA, and independent observatories, the data still pulsed quietly, a pattern too deliberate to die. Teams continued to analyze it in secret, running simulations, cross-referencing spectral lines, searching for meaning in the faint echoes left behind. What they found was not comfort. It was structure. Hidden within the electromagnetic residue of that half-second pulse recorded on January 4th lay a fractal distribution, recursive geometry repeating across every frequency band. Not random static, not cosmic noise. It was order, imprinted into radiation itself, like a fingerprint of intention. When translated into visual models, it resembled the same hexagonal pattern seen in the object's formation, an echo of the geometry that had appeared in Saturn's aurora weeks later. Two separate phenomena, one identical signature. Nature does not repeat perfection by accident. Inside the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a classified memo circulated briefly before being buried. It proposed a theory that bordered on heresy, that Three-Eye Atlas had not simply passed through the solar system, it had calibrated something, adjusted fields, tuned frequencies. The memo's language was precise but poetic. The event appears less as visitation and more as measurement. The solar system may have been scanned, not observed. It suggested that the geometry of the pulse matched known plasma harmonics within Earth's magnetosphere, implying resonance, not coincidence. Whatever the object was, it had interacted with our environment at a level far beyond comprehension, leaving not technology, but alignment. Yet the most haunting discovery came months later, when a small team at the European Southern Observatory cross-checked the data against planetary magnetometer records. They found faint but synchronized perturbations in the magnetic fields of Earth, Mars, and Saturn, all separated by hundreds of millions of kilometers, yet resonating at intervals identical to the 26-minute pulse detected in January. The effect was imperceptible to human senses, but measurable in instruments. It was as if something had linked the planets for a brief moment in time, weaving them together in a pattern that defied both scale and logic. The signal faded after 6 days, leaving no physical trace, only numbers that refused to align with any known model of celestial mechanics. The official explanation was silence. No one spoke publicly. The data was never published. But those who had seen it began to dream of strange things, of symmetry and light, of music written into magnetic fields, of a cosmos not chaotic, but conscious. Across scientific circles, an unspoken realization grew like a shadow. Perhaps Three-Eye Atlas had not come from another civilization. Perhaps it was the civilization, what remained of one. Not a probe, not a ship, but an artifact of intelligence that had transcended matter itself, existing only as geometry, energy, and will. The idea was terrifying. It meant that intelligence might not die. It might dissolve into physics, embedding itself into the structure of reality, traveling not through space, but through resonance. By mid-2026, deep space radars stopped detecting the object altogether. Three-Eye Atlas had vanished beyond the heliopause, where sunlight fades and interstellar winds rule. But even there, faint traces of its wake persisted, an electromagnetic trail stretching across billions of kilometers, like a thread connecting the solar system to the dark between stars. A few radio astronomers still tune their instruments to that region, listening for the impossible hum that once flickered through their machines. Sometimes they claim they hear it again, a soft rhythm buried in the noise, faint but steady, as if something vast and ancient were still watching, still measuring. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of our telescopes, perhaps Three-Eye Atlas continues its silent work, drifting through the dark between worlds, assembling, transmitting, or simply remembering. Maybe it was never meant to be found. Maybe it was never meant for us at all. But for one brief moment, it passed through our sky, and in its wake, it left a question too large for science and too quiet for faith. What if intelligence is not something that builds machines, but something that builds universes? Now, as the silence returns to the solar system, what remains of Three-Eye Atlas is not dust or debris, but memory, a scar of wonder carved into the mind of a species that finally saw beyond itself. The telescopes that once tracked its every shimmer now stare into the same empty coordinates, finding only darkness. But that darkness is not the same as before. It feels charged, waiting, as though the sky itself remembers. The object, if it ever was one, has long since crossed into interstellar space, leaving behind no artifact, no message, no proof. Only a pattern too elegant to dismiss, and a silence too deliberate to forget. In the months after its disappearance, humanity struggled to fit the event into language. Scientists called it data. Philosophers called it revelation. The public, restless and afraid, called it a myth. But beneath every theory lay the same unspoken truth. Something vast had noticed us. Whether by design or by coincidence, Three-Eye Atlas had looked inward, through the sun's light, through our instruments, through our questions, and for a heartbeat in cosmic time, it had mirrored us back to ourselves. For the first time, we saw the possibility that intelligence might not travel in ships or signals. It might drift in plasma fields, fold itself into geometry, or hum across the frequencies of light. It might not seek conversation. It might not need recognition. It might only need to exist, to continue the act of knowing. In that sense, Three-Eye Atlas was not an intruder, but a reflection, a fragment of awareness moving through the universe like a thought through a sleeping mind. NASA's final report ended with a sentence that was half science and half confession. Object Three-Eye Atlas exhibited behavior inconsistent with known physical models. Origin remains undetermined. Observational sequence complete. That was the official end, but for those who had watched, it was only the beginning. A quiet generation of astronomers now studies the patterns left behind in magnetospheres, light curves, and plasma fields, searching not for the object itself, but for what it might have awakened. Because if Three-Eye Atlas was real, and the data says it was, then it means something extraordinary. The universe is not silent. It breathes. It remembers. And sometimes, it sends echoes through the dark for those who are listening. Perhaps that was the purpose all along, not contact, not conquest, but curiosity. To remind us that even in the vast machinery of space, we are not separate. We are part of the pattern. A brief, flickering node in a network of light that stretches beyond comprehension. 1,000,000 times larger than any comet before it, 1,000,000 times stranger than we were ready to believe. Three-Eye Atlas came and went like a dream, It left no voice, no trace, only a single truth that now lingers in the silence between stars. The universe is not waiting to speak. It already has.